about to have a conversation with a very unique person. She studied to be a neurologist. She could have had a very promising career in the United States of America, but she gave all that up so that she could study with a guru called Swami Chidanand Saraswati of Rishikesh, India. She now devotes her life to serving humanity. Her name is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati. For somebody who's just now starting to get engaged in these conversations, and let's say somebody living in London, working in a bank, or in New York, it's just starting to get interested in these questions. In terms of a practice, like a simple practice on a daily basis, what would you recommend? What would you guide them towards?
Wonderful. Well, the good news is that memory, that false identification, that which I've brought into the future, into the present, is a pattern of chemical and electrical activity in our brains. That's really all it is. It's a habit. And what we know is now that our brains can change, which means that we can change it. Because people say, well, I've been like this forever, it's too late, how do I do it? Our brains, we now know, and this is recent. Our rishis and sages have told us this forever, but neurology, even just as recently as when I was getting a PhD, neurology was telling us that, by late adolescence, once the brain has myelinized, you're done. The best you can do is give people pharmaceuticals and adjust the brain as long as they're taking the pharmaceuticals, but that the brain can't be changed. Now we know that the brain is constantly changing. So many things that we do in our lives change the brain. So we can change those patterns. And if you ask, well, how do I start? For each of us, it's going to be slightly different.
Yeah.
I'm not a proponent of cookie cutter approaches because our clay is different. And so the removal of that isn't going to be a cookie cutter. But a good place to start would be to say, okay, what's my clay? What is it that's holding me back? And then how can I undo that? How can I bring about a different experience? So for example, if what I'm working with is grudges, pain, anger, it's something that happened in the past, let's say, and I've brought that into the present. I was abused in the past. So we have an action that took place, but then we have all of the ramifications in the present, which is I now believe that I am worthless, useless, dirty, a victim. So I've built up an entire identity around the act. It's not just my anger and pain and grudge at he or she who perpetrated this act, but it's also an entire identity I've built up around that.
And the decisions that a person makes as a result of what they experience.
Of course. Well, I'm going to make decisions based on how I identify myself. If I am worthless and useless, then I'm certainly not going to take a risk to do something that only someone who is worthy and useful and wonderful could possibly succeed at. I'm going to move through my life with that identity of a victim. And so if we say, for example, that my clay is this, or the majority of my clay is this thing that happened in which I was abused, betrayed, cheated, I got the short end of the stick in the universal scheme of things. I feel anger and pain and grudges at he or she or they who did this. And now I've adapted my life accordingly. Well, we start in one place. First place that I would start is I would say, who is the person to whom that happened? Who's the I? An inquiry is a beautiful place to start. And that's why I say I'm not a big proponent of the cookie cutter approach. What we know about affirmations, and I could say to you, well, okay, so a good place to start is we start with an affirmation. And the affirmation is I look at myself in the mirror every day and I say, I am beautiful, I am worthy.
But that's just putting something on top of the mud.
And what we know is it tends not to work very well. It's dealing only with the most outermost layer of the conscious mind. Whereas that which is propelling so much of how we act is actually the subconscious mind. So I would begin with inquiry. It's not the end, but it's a great place to start. With the inquiry of, who am I? Who am I really? I'm not that being. I don't share one skin cell with that being. I'm not even my emotions. We say, well, I am depressed. I am an alcoholic. I am a drug addict. I am angry. What we now know neurologically is that actually if I take a probe, just a long steel thing, and I stimulate different areas of your brain. The brain actually doesn't have pain sensors. So I actually could go into your brain. And this is how they do all of the neurologic studies. People are wide awake, fully conscious. They tend, of course, to do them only with people who were getting brain surgery anyway, because you don't want to open up people's scalps unnecessarily. But they actually can go in with a probe and stimulate different areas of the brain and make you feel angry. Can stimulate one area and make you feel full of rage. Stimulate another area, make you cry. Stimulate another area, make you feel sexually aroused. Stimulate another area, make you feel so many different things. The point of that being that we identify so deeply with our emotions. Then we say, well, God, if a metal probe could make me angry, or make me sad, or make me feel lust, then clearly that's not I. And then you go even a step further, and you start looking at people with diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, where even their relationships, they start to forget people who were the most important people in their lives. And yet, they're fully conscious, fully present. They're not in a coma. They're absolutely able to have a conversation. It may not bear any connection to the reality, your reality, but they're fully functional on so many other levels. You say, well, all that's happened in that case is we've had a degeneration of certain proteins in the brain. Well, am I just functional proteins? Of course not. And so we start to inquire, and simply the process of inquiry undoes so much of the bondage. And then we take it a step deeper. And going back to my example, if we say, well, I am that which happened, can I forgive? Can I let go? And I think if I had to pinpoint one practice, if I had to give a cookie cutter type of answer, the practice that I would give would be a practice of letting go. And of course, what we let go of is going to vary person to person. But if you just started a breathing practice, we don't even have to call it meditation, where 10 minutes a day, you sit down and you breathe. And on each exhalation, you literally just let go of a mask, a role, a facade,
A belief.
a belief.
One thing a day. One thing
One
a week.
Well, yeah, I mean, you may be able to do one thing a breath and then just do it again.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be for 10 straight minutes I'm giving up the same thing on every breath. It's going to be whatever comes naturally. As I exhale, can I let go of whatever in that breath is forming a vice around who I am? And it varies breath to breath. It could be the anger, the pain, the responsibility, the role, whatever it is.
And some things are easier to let go of, and it may be a breath, just simply bringing it into the conscious mind, making that choice freely. I'm going to let this go today. So something's
Or even I'm going to just let this go for 30 seconds.
Yes.
We may not even necessarily be able to say, I'll let it go for the whole day.
Sadhana, practice. Exactly. So some things may take longer and other things are less sticky. So they may be able to just slide off you, in a given breath. So really, simple practice, simply sitting down for 10 minutes a day, breathing, normal breaths, no fancy meditation practices,
definitely
no pranayama. Yeah. Just simple, through the nose, out the nose, through the nose, out the nose. Great.
And another important piece of that is that letting go is very scary for us.
Yes. Brings up a lot of fear.
We really are identified with our clay. And so one thing that's very important, I think, for people is that we're not saying let it go forever. What we're saying is we're sitting here on Mother Earth. Mother Earth is sustaining us, holding us, nourishing us, nurturing us. She'll hold this for us. Can I just, it's like you slip into a hot bath. What do? You take off all your clothes. With the knowledge and the awareness that at some point after you get out of the bath, you may want to put them back on again. You may not. You may incinerate them. But they're there for you. Having the experience of being able to sink into the bath, and of course that's just on a physical level, we're talking on a much, much deeper level, but just as a physical metaphor.
What if I could let this go? How would it feel? Just for a few moments.
With the awareness that if I decide later that I want to put this back on, and of course most of us decide it's so much nicer without it, we don't want to put it back on. But we're not saying give it up forever. Give yourself an experience of a few minutes a day of what it's like to live without the clay. What it's like to live without the costumes, without the makeup, without the roles, without the tight shoes. See what it's like to sink into the experience of the self. And here's what's amazing. As I said, we're not going to call it meditation, and yet, as we let go of that which is keeping us from the self, meditation actually happens. It becomes the fruit, you could say, of the process of letting go. So it's not that I've said, okay, now I'm going to sit down, I'm going to meditate, but then I've got all of this in my head, and I'm going to fight it off and push it away. The practice becomes, and of course then it's much less anxiety producing, because for most of us, when we begin a meditation process or practice, it's anxiety producing for people, because it's, I can't do this. Yet another thing I'm bad at. Yet another thing that, I'm worthless at. I knew I couldn't do it. Even meditation isn't for me. And if we begin with simply a process of, I'm just going to let go. And in this breath, I'm going to let go of that deadline. And in this breath, I'm going to let go of that diet. And in this breath, I'm going to let go of the anger at that person who hurt me yesterday. And as we go breath by breath by breath, that which we're letting go of gets deeper wider.
And you become more accomplished in the process.
I would say you become more real, more the true self. You become less rather than more. You know, I always say meditation is a practice of undoing. But in that undoing, you know, this is an interesting diversion of where people on a Buddhist path talk about emptiness, shunya, nothingness. Whereas within Hinduism, we tend to talk much more about an everythingness,
Yes.
the infinite.
All-inclusiveness, yes.
Exactly, and yet it's actually the same. It's a semantic difference. You may begin the path in different ways, but at the end, that everythingness is nothingness. And that nothingness is everything. So, as you let go and become less and less, more and more nothing, it creates space of everythingness.
Yeah. So, you know, meditation is such a big topic. As a yoga teacher, you know, part of what I bring into the classes that I offer is meditation, and exactly as you've said, to just do it through the breath. People come to me and say, but how can I stop my thoughts? How can my mind gets more active. It becomes more combative as I become more silent, or as there is more silence around me. And so this is exactly what you're saying, is that the two are like this. In the beginning, would you say that in the beginning there is more turbulence and you just need to, what do? You just breathe into it?
Yeah, well, look at the ocean. You know, Pujya Swamiji always talks about this, and it's just such a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. He says, on the surface of the ocean is where the waves are. And if you are attached to the highs, if you're living for the highs, looking for the highs, you can be pretty sure you're going to have lows. It's the nature of the way that the waves go. If what you're looking for is peace, you're not going to find it on the surface. At least not for very long. There may be a calm few minutes. But the nature is there's going to be waves, there's going to be turbulence. And the only way to find that constant peace is to go deep.
Is to dive down.
And so the only answer to the turbulence is not to try to fight off the waves from the surface, but to simply go down. I mean, anybody who's ever swum in the ocean knows that when you're in the ocean, even just at the shore, and you're wading in the ocean, as the waves come, you can never outrun a wave. They're much faster than you are. As the wave comes, the only thing to do is to turn around and actually dive into it. It's the only way to save yourself in the wave. Or if you're out far enough, to just allow the wave to carry you up and then carry you down. But if you're at that place where, you're not quite out far enough and the waves are breaking, the only way to get through it peacefully is every time the wave comes to turn and face it and dive into it. Not to turn your back on it and try to outrun it or to try to fight it.
Or another way of saying it in terms of real practice is to surrender into what's coming. Just allow yourself to go with it.
But not to hang on to it. We're not attaching ourselves to the wave. We've gone in one direction, it's gone the other. So we've surrendered to it. But surrender to it as we have dived down beneath it. It's not I've surrendered to it and now I'm going to ride it and crash onto the shore and end up getting all, bruised and beaten. I've gone deeply into it. I'm going to continue to deepen my practice, whether it's through the breath, whether it's through a mantra, whether it's through whatever my technique is. And as the turbulence comes, I'm going to surrender to the fact that there's turbulence. But I'm not going to attach myself to the individual thoughts or the individual turbulence. Because typically that's what happens. Oh my God, this thought again, I thought I was done with this. Oh my God, not this again. Or we start to analyze it or judge it. And all that's done is it's actually attached us to that wave.
So, in the Western New Age movement, there's a lot of talk about being the source, right? And I always wonder about that. I rather like to think that we are a part of a flow of grace within that overall scheme of things. What do you have to say about this being the source versus being in the flow of grace?
I love this question because I come from the West and I come from California, which I don't know sociologically, but it certainly seems like is the birthplace
of New Age.
The New Age movement.
Say that.
And what's interesting about it is that you hear so much of the Eastern philosophy in it, and yet it's been not just diluted, but really misunderstood in ways that I feel are actually very detrimental to people's spiritual path, emotional paths, and psychological paths.
It tends to depress sometimes because people pick and choose.
They pick and
parts
choose
of a complete philosophy, and something that works in a given setting, and other things that don't necessarily suit. So,
well, and I think what they're missing also along with that is the depth behind it. So as you say, be the source. Or you take something, aham brahmasmi. I am the divine, I am the creator, I am that. And the issue with this is, yes, of course it's true. This is what's given to us in the scriptures. And yet, that doesn't mean that I am only that. It doesn't mean that I don't also have an ego and a body and emotions and vasanas and desires and illusion and all of these other all too human traits. Aham brahmasmi, yes, at the core of your being, the untouched core, we are divine. But we've got these bodies, we've got these minds, we've got ignorance, we've got illusion, we've got desires, and to ignore that or to pretend that it doesn't exist is so detrimental to us because it's the sense of I'm done. Aham brahmasmi, there is nowhere else to go. I'm perfect. I'm done. Now you should wash my feet and cook me dinner because I'm God. The real awareness is, well, if I'm divine, then so is everyone else. And so actually I should be washing your feet and cooking you dinner because you're God. Whereas typically that sort of half-baked awareness comes with such arrogance because inherent in it is the sense of I'm done, there's nowhere else to go. I mean, I'm divine, I'm God. I heard that without realizing that yes, the source is. It's like we talk about the analogy of the drop in the ocean. The ocean being the divine. we are the drops. At our core, we're the same. If you look at us under a microscope, the molecules of H2O are the same as the molecules of H2O in the ocean. We have been, as Pujya Swamiji says, not only created by the Creator, but created of the Creator. And yet, for a drop to stand up and announce that it could, drown someone or float a yacht would be, not only seriously wrong and illusory, but really detrimental to someone's own self-awareness and their own path. The sense of, I'm a drop and I am the ocean, is where that sense of be the source comes from. No, as a drop, you can't drown someone. You can't float a yacht. You can't sustain life. The ocean sustains life. As a drop, we cannot sustain life. At the core, you're the ocean. The path of your life is to return to the ocean. All water on earth is moving back toward the ocean. When you merge with the ocean, when you've lost the dropness, and that boundary of where the drop ended and the ocean began is gone because the drop has merged within, then you're ocean. But until that point, you have to be, as you say, in the flow. But the flow is back to the source, back to the ocean. So it's really both and neither at the same time. And it's much more just an awareness of, at my core, who I am is divine and pure and perfect and ocean and gold. And all the ego and all the anger and all the pain and all the desires doesn't make me any less gold or pure or divine or ocean. But it reminds me that I have to keep moving with the flow to re-merge with the ocean. Not that here in my isolated dropness, I'm everything. So we can only be the source when we have first connected with the source.
So you have to be in the flow of something much bigger than yourself, which is the same as yourself, but you are a subset of that. So a microcosm and a macrocosm, if you like.
Yeah, you can be the source when you've united with the source. I mean, you're a yoga teacher. When you look at the 8 limbs of yoga that take us up, beginning from practices as simple as ahimsa and satya, so non-violence and truthfulness. And at the end, we end up in samadhi, which is that union, that divine bliss that yoga means. But it's a path to get there. That's the goal. That's the union that the word yoga means. But we start with nonviolence and truthfulness. We don't start by walking into a yoga class and proclaiming, I'm done. We start with a practice. And the fruit of the practice is that samadhi, that experience of oneness. And that's when we can experience being the source. But anything prior to that is just narcissism.
And as Lord Krishna says, it's none of your business. I'm paraphrasing Lord Krishna now. It's none of your business when that happens, how it happens, where it happens. The fruits are not within your control.
Nor should we be attached to it happening.
To it happening at all.
The question is, how can I, in my dropness, hold on to the awareness that I'm ocean at the core? Hold on to the awareness that I'm on a path. We use the word gravity to describe the path, but I'm on a path The universe is carrying me back to the ocean. That's the flow. I will unite with the ocean. And in the moment, all I have to do is move with that universal flow back to the ocean and throw off as much as I can of that which is encumbering me from a swift movement back to uniting with the ocean.
Thank you.